Uhuru comrades, and welcome to this broadcast. My name is Akile Anai, and I am the Director of Agitation and Propaganda for the African People's Socialist Party, as well as the Editor-in-Chief of the Burning Spear newspaper. Before we get started with today's program, I want to encourage our viewers to like this video and share it widely. You should also subscribe to the Burning Spear TV YouTube page for more content such as this. Welcome to this critically important event today. The African People's Socialist Party is holding this panel to sum up the July 7th assassination of the president of Haiti, Jouvenel Moise. We will be discussing the deepening crisis in Haiti and look at the current situation in what is known as South Africa, including the arrest of Jacob Zuma and the serious anti-government struggles of African people in Eswatini, formerly Swaziland. While there are many different explanations being given by the colonial-capitalist media, as well as confusion from progressives, the purpose of this event today is to introduce science into this discussion and to provide revolutionary leadership from the African People's Socialist Party, not just to report on this. We have a powerful panel of forces from the African People's Socialist Party around the world to sum up this situation. Today, we'll be hearing from Moise Kinshasa, who is our Secretary General of the African Socialist International, Alikia Ngoma, the party's Haiti editor for the Burning Spear newspaper, and Comrade Director Chafari Mugari, who leads the party's work in South Africa or occupied Azania and all of Africa, and Penny Hess, the chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee, the party's organization of white people organizing in the white community for reparations to African people. Our keynote speaker will come from Chairman Amalia Shatella, the leader of the African nation. It is my honor now to introduce our first speaker, Secretary General Moise Kinshasa, who will discuss why it is not just Haiti, it's the world. Uhuru SG Moise.
Uhuru Director Akile, thank you so much for the introduction. This forum, this meeting is not an event. It's a critical process that the African People's Socialist Party has put in place for a long time now. And I just want to, to say I'm really honored and humbled at the same time to be part of this forum. So I just want to salute Chairman Amalia Shatella, the leader, the founder, the leader of the International African Liberation Movement of our time, the organization that has put the revolution back on the agenda, and the organization that has the solution for all Black people on a planet. Chairman Amalia Shatella has done that. He has solved all the problems of that the Black revolution of the 60s solved. So I just want to salute his profound leadership, and I also want to salute all the panelists who are going to share this forum with me. So, and of course, I want to salute all of you who are watching and this meeting. So. We are in a very, very, very serious crisis of parasitic capitalism. And this crisis is not our crisis. We don't have to take this crisis as our own, but the solution to this crisis is our own solution. That's really the first thing I would like to say. The solution to this crisis of colonial capitalism is our solution. It has to be our own solution. And we watch the news about what's going on in Haiti. You heard how the bourgeois media, they cannot miss a single opportunity to slander Haiti. Lies after lies. Nobody says that Haiti fed France. Haiti funded the French Revolution. They don't say the US looted Haiti. They don't say anything like that. Haiti inspired their national liberation movement throughout the Americas. That's why you hear today of a Bolivarian revolution and things like that. You don't hear anything like that. And what's really important for us is that I know some sisters in our movement used to say, you need to have a bigger picture. What is the bigger picture? So when we're looking at Haiti, we have to have a bigger picture. international picture, a world view of what's going on in Haiti. You heard what the bourgeois media said. They said, well, they arrested former soldiers or soldiers from Colombia and other Africans from Haiti living in the US. There was a link to Venezuela, a link to Taiwan. And they, when you ask questions to the people who are in charge in Haiti, what needs to happen? You will see people saying they need help. And you listen to the US leaders, they say they need to help Haiti. So basically, what's going on in Haiti is international. But the real significance of it is that it is an African question. This is really fundamental. What's happening to Haiti is an African question. And it's as much as an African question, just like the war is going on in Mali is African question. The violence, is going on in Nigeria against the people in Nigeria. You all know what's going on in South Africa. Uprising rebellion taking place in South Africa. African question. The war in the Congo, African question. What's happening in Somali, African question. For sometimes now, the US, bombs part of Somalia and, in the so-called war on terror, stuff like that. There are killings on the streets of America. George Floyd, Sarah Bland, and other Africans were being killed there. That's the African question. You go to Chad, you go to Cameroon, you go to Central African Republic, where the French and Russians are there competing for control of Central African Republic, which is just north of the border of Congo. You go to Niger, where the US has drones, to make wars in that part of Africa. All these things make up the African question, which means that we are not happy, we are catching hell, we are powerless because the African question has not been resolved. That's why we're catching hell. Haiti is a mess because the African question has not been resolved. When I say the African question, it means Black people have not consolidated what we call the Black nation, the African nation, which means that we have not yet achieved national liberation. It means that the fundamental, the premise upon which the capitalist system rests upon has not been overturned. It means that the United States, France, Britain, the whole capitalist system, the international capitalist system, which depend on colonization of all Black people, of all Africa, has not been overturned. The relationship between Africans and our oppressors have not been overturned. This is the African question, which means you cannot see anywhere on the planet Africans being happy. You cannot see a genuine African personality. How Africans should really look like in the real world if Africans and Africa was united and free. This has not been done, has not been resolved. So what we have is a fake independence. We don't have a free Africa. It doesn't exist. There is no single free African country where when you need help, as Marcus Garvey used to say, we need to have a Black unity so that when we need help, we just press on the button and the power of 100 million Black people come to your rescue. It does not exist. So that's the African question. That's why we're catching hell in Haiti. That's why Haiti is in a mess, just like Africa is in a mess. That's why all those things. And nobody, of course, the bourgeoisie does not want to tell the truth, and the bourgeoisie cannot tell the truth. It's not their interest to tell the truth. And when they speak about Haiti, as I say, the slander, they show all these chaotic, bad images just to say something's wrong with us. They don't show you, they don't tell you that Napoleon, when he sent his generals and his troops in Haiti, one of them's name was Rochambeau. he bought dogs from colonizers in Cuba, in Spain, Spanish controlled Cuba. And those dogs were trained to feed on African people. That was Napoleon's response to African revolution, that we have to put down that revolution, send dogs. And can you just imagine dogs being fed on us? Can you see the level of barbarity, of carnage? But Africans responded, liberty or death. That's how Africans responded. No amount of violence can convince us to surrender. That's the lesson Haiti gave us. Of course, the bourgeoisie doesn't say anything like that. The bourgeoisie wants to demoralize us. Whenever you watch the TV, that's what the bourgeoisie is about. You know, demoralized by people. See, since you became independent, since you made the revolution, nothing works. Of course, nothing works because the United States and France attacked Haiti, never given Haiti the space Haiti needs. Of course, that the bourgeoisie would not say that. And so we are here basically to say, we are not just to tell the truth, but we're here to say that the world as you know it is changing. That's why you see the power of the United States is dying. The power of France is dying. The power of England is dying. That's what you see everywhere. You see new forces emerging. And we, under the leadership, when I say we Africans, under the leadership of the Haitian Revolution, we launched that movement, the movement to smash international colonial capitalism and replace it with another system of workers. So Haiti gave the world the first successful workers' revolution. You know, so the struggle between the future and the past was initiated in Haiti. And as I said, this is no event, an event, this is a process. You can see for yourself, it's a long process. Now we're reaching a new level in that process. We are in a place now, we can fight in Haiti, and we can fight in South Africa, we can fight in the United States, we can fight in Europe, we can fight in the Pacific Island at the same time with the same consciousness, which means with the same philosophy, the same organization. So we can fight with knowing that is one revolution, is one trajectory, and is one aim, is to free the African nation and overturn forever the international parasitic colonial capitalist system, which gives happiness to our oppressors. And Haiti, as I said, launched that struggle. But that struggle, of course, is not over. That's what the crisis in Haiti is telling us. It's not over. We're just now entering a new phase. That's why we want everyone who is listening, who is not part of our organization of the African People Socialist Party, should join today. Because we are in a place now, we have to demand accountability from everybody. Why aren't you joining the Haitian Revolution? Why aren't you joining the African Revolution? Which means, why aren't you joining the African People's Socialist Party? That's where we are today, because that's the African question. Is everyone being part of the revolution or being in support of it? Because we have no future outside the revolution. So every African has to respond to that. And this is just a fundamental situation. This is where we are today. We want to recapture our future. So the French, the United States, all these forces and their collaborators, the African petit bourgeoisie everywhere, they represent the forces of the past. Being in West Africa, in Central Africa, wherever they are, the African petit bourgeoisie and the bourgeoisie, the imperialist bourgeoisie, represent the forces of the past that will never regain the dynamism or the strength they had like 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years ago. They can go to space if they want. They might not even be able to come back. But the reality is that they represent the forces of the past. And who are the forces of the future? The African proletariat, the African workers in alliance with the African poor peasants. We are the forces of the future. The Black Revolution is the revolution of the future. And Haiti, as I said in the beginning, is a part of the African proletarian struggle, where the African working class needs to emerge as the leader, uncontested leaders of the African Revolution. This is where you see the struggles happening in Haiti, the mobilization that's taking place there. You can see the response of the imperialists and the puppets is to try to intimidate the people, bring violence to the neighborhood of the working class and the poor peasant, bringing all these tontomacoute things like that. It won't work because we are the African nation. We used to say 1.5 billion people. Now we will begin to say soon to be over 2 billion people. And there is no force that can stop that. There is no force on earth can stop a mobilized nation of 2 billion people. And that's where we are. So we want African people to understand that what's happening in Haiti is happening everywhere. It's happening where you are. There is no place where Africans are resident or where we live, where there is a social peace. There isn't. There is no place like that. Just England, they lost the final yesterday, and Africans were attacked because the Africans missed the penalties, and Africans were attacked on the street, outside the stadium, and things like that. And the reason they were attacked, just for the same reason Africans workers are being attacked in Haiti, because we have not completed the African national liberation, which means we have not yet consolidated the international Black state, the international African working class state, because the African nation to exist can only be led by the African workers, can't be led by any other social force. For the revolution to happen, it has to be led by the African workers, because African petit bourgeoisie, if they are united with you today, you don't know if like the day after or a week after, they will be with somebody else. They are unstable, a force that can't be loyal to the revolution until victory. You have to keep them under your leadership, so they cannot harm the revolution. So you are in control. The African working class has to be in control. So this process, basically, it's happening everywhere. And we also want to say that we don't want to hear that the United States is going to Haiti to help. We don't want to hear that. US has been there, I don't know for how many years, maybe 400 years. What you see in Haiti, that's the United States. That's the consequences of the United States intervention. So wherever we are, we should be up in arms. We do not want to see the United States in Haiti in any form of FBI or US aid in any form. We don't want the United States there. We don't want Canada there. We don't want France there. We don't want the UN there. We have to fight tooth and nails for our own solution. You don't see anywhere where people are saying we want Black people from all over the world to be mobilized, to go to Haiti, to intervene in Haiti. You don't hear anything like that, or a call to organize so we can have our own solution. We're saying that Haiti needs an African solution. Haiti needs an African revolution solution. Haiti needs an African working class led revolution. That's what we say. And the question of unity is not a small thing, brothers and sisters and comrades. It's not a small thing. The question of leadership is not a small thing. We cannot win without leadership, without revolutionary leadership. And we have it. We have the African Socialist International under the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela. The question of leadership. We need to know who is the leadership. You can't just say you want Black people to unite. You go say Black people united under African Socialist International, under Yeshitelism, under the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela. We go be clear. We have our leader and leadership. We have our own party ready to provide the leadership for every single struggle of Black people everywhere. I'll repeat that again. The question of leadership is not a small thing. We need to have the party that organize, mobilize internationally. As I said in the beginning, a bigger picture. When the system meeting say you go have a bigger picture. The bigger picture, that's the African Socialist International with a clear leadership, clear philosophy, clear vision. That's really, this is critical. And these are the facts that Africans are being confused by opportunism of Pan-Africanism, force like that has been detrimental because a lot of people who want to see Africa united, they think it's the same thing as to be Pan-Africans. It's not. It's not the same thing. That's why we're insisting on a question of leadership, the question of unity. Unity is really key. It's no small thing. And African internationalism basically introduces you, gives you the worldwide scope, what it really means to be in unity, in a revolution, how to mobilize all Black people everywhere for one struggle, one revolution, and one organization. It's not a myth. We've got one future. We're going to build one economy. And to do that, because we've got everything Haiti needs. We should not be starving anywhere, not alone in Haiti. But this question of organization under one leadership is really fundamental. So they talk about the collapsing of the state. We're talking about building a new state. The state is collapsing. That's African petit bourgeoisie, the colonial state. The African petit bourgeoisie cannot unite. They serve different interests. They serve individual interests. They have no interest in a revolution. You see them doing all this infighting and so on. The African working class, we are interested only in a revolution, which requires basically the unity for all our people. So I will just end basically in saying I wanted to read just one paragraph, then I will stop here. This is a really key question because everyone, when we talk about Haiti, instead of talking of the revolution, a lot of people want to take us to, mystical stuff. We are spiritual. We know that. They want to take you to say voodoo is primary, things like that. We won't tell you this. I'm going to read from quickly, just one paragraph, then I'll stop. Vanguard Up, that's Unity of Theory and Practice, which is a political report to the 2020 First 7th Congress Plenary of the African People's Socialist Party by Chairman Omali Yeshitela. So on page 14, where we talk of, I'll stop here because I think I misplaced the pages I wanted to read. Yeah, I'll stop here. I don't want to read another paragraph. Maybe during discussion time, I might be able to come back to that. So thank you so much. I'll stop here.
Secretary General Lazy Kinshasa, I just want to thank you for that brilliant analysis. This presentation has already lit the fire of this whole program, so thank you so much. And before going to our next speaker, I want to inform our viewers that there will be a Q&A period towards the end of our program, so make sure you type your questions into the chat section. And now I am very happy to bring up Alicia Ngoma to talk about the assassination of Moise and the significance of the African Revolution of Haiti. Uhuru, Alicia.
Uhuru, thank you, Dr. Akile, for that introduction. My name is Alicia Ngoma, and I am a member of the African People's Socialist Party. I am the administrative assistant for Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who I want to salute and thank for allowing me to be on this program today. Also, being in the party, the chairman has assigned me to be the Haiti expert of the African People's Socialist Party, as well as the Haiti editor of the Burning Spear newspaper, which is the official organ of the African People's Socialist Party, where I provide revolutionary analysis on the history and present day struggle and resistance of our people in Haiti. As Akile introduced this webinar on Wednesday, July 7th, 2021, at approximately 1 a.m., Haiti President Jouvenel Moise was assassinated at his residency, and his wife, Martine Moise, was left in critical condition. The news came as a shock to the world, especially to the people of Haiti, even those who had been demanding that he step down from office, as well as those of us who recognized him as a puppet of the white power imperialists and ruling class. Even we were caught off guard by this news. There immediately began to be a lot of questions raised about this assassination. Who did it and why? Who would have access to his house? Where was security? Was security in on it? How did anybody find out? Who took Martine to the hospital? And perhaps the biggest question of them all was, given that in October of 2019, Jouvenel began to rule by decree, and on January 13, 2020, Jouvenel Moise announced his dissolvement of the Parliament of Haiti. Also, given that Jouvenel previously fired the Prime Minister, and 2 days before his assassination, he appointed a new Prime Minister who had not officially taken office, who now runs the country. There were also questions raised about the day itself. How will the people react? What about the gangs? What is Port-au-Prince in particular like right now? And what's next for Haiti? And then after that, we started to receive a bunch of inconsistent, so-called details about the assassination. At one point, as Julie kind of touched on, at one point it was a mission carried out by about 29 Colombian mercenaries, perhaps even mercenaries that Jouvenel brought into the country himself. And over the next few days, just different lies were being said, lies about that there was chaos in the country when that had not been true. The country was pretty much still and quiet, even the streets of Port-au-Prince, which normally is full of a lot of resistance and protests that we have seen over the past few years. As well as lies about the need for the United States and the United Nations peacekeepers to come into the country to keep stability. So on the question on briefly, who was Jouvenel Moise? Former Haiti President Jouvenel Moise was the presidential candidate of the Parti Haïtien Tête Calais, PHTK, which means Haitian Bald-Headed Party, whose campaign included promoting him as the banana man, who was going to do good for Haiti by reigniting our economy via agriculture and other production that previously sustained us, as well as promises of things that the people of Haiti should already have, such as decent roads and 24-hour electricity. Despite his campaign and their promotion of him as like the saint that was gonna save everybody, he only received 32.8% of the popular vote in the preliminary rounds of the election against another candidate who only received 25%. And despite neither of the candidates receiving at least 50% of the vote, which is required to move on, Jouvenel was able to move on to the second round of the election. And that presidential election only resulted in a registered voter turnout of 21%. And one thing that the chairman has talked about is Africans just really seeing that, the electoral process, is not, although, we can intervene in it and make it a tool of the African Revolution, historically speaking, the electoral process has not been a friend of African people. So with a voter registration of 21%, that's a statement to how Africans in Haiti saw that election anyway. So in the actual election, he received 6% of the vote and was declared 6% of the vote and was declared president based on his 32% in the first round. His presidency was protested against by the people of Haiti from the very beginning. Without going into much redundant detail, some of which can be found in my articles for the Burning Spirit newspaper. Long story short is that Jouvenel Moise was a neo-colonial leader and a representative of white power in blackface, which is one of the ways that the African People's Socialist Party defines neo-colonialism in a simpler kind of way. He was not a martyr, nor did he die for the country, as some petty bourgeois forces in and out of Haiti are beginning to characterize him. There has been much speculation as to why Jouvenel would be assassinated, including alleged internal problems within the PHTK. You know, it has been generally assumed by most people that the United States was involved in the assassination, and it could be for a number of reasons, including that, you know, sometimes the imperialists use you, and then once you're not useful anymore, they just do what they have to do with you. So, you know, today there has been a mixed response, at least after the first day, about how we should feel about the assassination of Jouvenel Moise, and that as people from Haiti or as Haitians, that we should still be mourning because he was, quote, still our president. You know, he was somebody's husband, he was somebody's father, 3 kids now have no father. So, you know, we should be humane and feel sorry for his assassination, especially the way he died, you know, because they really brutalized him. But we understand that in the struggle against oppression, there is no sympathy for any oppressive forces. You know, if you're using that logic, you can also say that on the plantation, colonial enslavers were also people's husbands, you know, and they were also people's fathers as well. But the way they function in our communities, in our countries and stuff like that, so many husbands and fathers, if you want to use that characterization, are victim to their regime, you know? So we as enslaved people, or as oppressed people, as colonized people, it's not in our interest to feel any kind of sympathy when a colonizer or a neo-colonizer or any kind of puppet dies, because they are here to keep us in oppression. They are here to keep us colonized. They are here to keep us oppressed. They are the extension of white power in our communities, in our countries. And, you know, if you are gonna be feeling sorry because this one died and this one died, then you might as well just give up the struggle for against oppression, as well as the struggle for revolution. You know, so there's questions about, you know, he should have just been arrested, and even those who wanted to see him out of power would have just preferred if he was not arrested but taken to court and tried, and, you know, all the money that he has stolen and all the lies that he has told the people, that he be tried the just way, the principled way, which we know that is still a statement of putting your faith in this system. You know, you're talking about in Haiti or in anywhere, but I'm talking about Haiti specifically, where you have hundreds of thousands of African people who are in prisons, who have never seen a judge at all because they've stole somebody's chickens or goats or cows. They're, you know, they stole a cow, a chicken, or goat, and they're locked up for life. They have not seen any kind of trial whatsoever. This is the same kind of judicial system you are expecting to give Jouvenel Moise or any of these neocolonial puppets a fair trial, and a trial that's right by the people. You know, it's insane to put your faith in any aspect of the system. And then in addition to that, as you can see in the other articles, Jouvenel was making a move to rewrite the Constitution anyway. And one of the things that he was proposing to write is that a president cannot be tried for something that he did while he was in office. So if that was going to be the solution, we just would have never seen any kind of result. So there is no question of him being brought to justice. There also is no question of justice for Jouvenel right now as he is murdered. You know, I have seen some organizations who were on the ground, not revolutionary organizations. I don't even think that they call themselves revolutionary organizations, but I have seen them enough on the ground during different struggles of the past few years in Haiti, even them writing statements sympathizing with Jouvenel and his family. And it's just very confusing. And, you know, one thing that I always end every single article that I write for the Burning Spear with is coupe tête boule caille, cut heads, burn houses. This is the slogan that Jean-Jacques Dessalines introduced to the revolution that was being waged between 1791 and 1803. Coupe tête boule caille, cut heads, burn houses. All of them have to go. You know, all of the oppressors and anybody who sides with them has to go. We don't have time to be picking and choosing who we're going to feel sorry for, especially when they have shown us time and time again that they side with the oppressor. Jouvenel Moise is someone when Evelyn Sincere, who I also wrote about, was kidnapped, raped, and murdered as a result of the gangs that Jouvenel has sponsored himself that terrorized the country, that have been reignited to shut down the resistance of the people that has been going on. Jouvenel tweeted, the police have only one job, which is to keep the bandits, that's the word that they use, to keep the bandits out of harm's way. And this is the person that people are trying to champion as someone that we need to feel sorry for or anything like that. So we say there won't be any of those kind of emotions over here. SG Louisi kind of talked about how white media covers Haiti. You know, I know that ever since I was young, any article I have ever read about Haiti, any news report, any video, anything on radio that I have ever read about Haiti begins with Haiti, the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, or Haiti, the poorest country in the Americas. And even as I have been trying to follow the different stories for, you know, preparing for this presentation and just in general, I've come across that sentence every single time. It drives me crazy. And, you know, as Louisi said, white media, they never tell you, okay, if Haiti is the poorest country in the Americas, if Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, what makes it that way? You know, how did Haiti just, was it rich? And then one day out of nowhere, it just became super poor without anything happening? No, they don't tell you that, you know, Haiti has been robbed and looted from ever since after the revolution. Haiti has been made to pay literally for having the revolution. You know, the white world united against Haiti and forced Haiti to pay France reparations for the loss of property that they lost during the revolution. And the property that they were referring to was African people ourselves, because in colonial slavery, African people were seen as property. We were the commodity, you know, and as the chairman always says, we were the capital of capitalism. And so Haiti has paid over $90 billion in today's gold prices if you had to convert it to France. You know, they also don't talk about the United States that came into Haiti and stole every piece of gold that was in the Haitian treasury and brought it to New York City. So when you're talking about Haiti being the poorest country, you know, in the Americas or in the Western Hemisphere, that is just a part of the propaganda. That is just a part of how they want you to understand Haiti and Haitians, and even us, you know, who are from Haiti. When we read this, that is information of how they want us to understand ourselves. And as I just mentioned, the Haitian Revolution, which was the first workers' revolution in the world. Before there was the Vietnamese Revolution, before there was the Workers' Revolution, before there was, the Russian Revolution, before there was Cuba, you know, there was Haiti, there was IET, there were African people. African people made the first workers' revolution in the world. In IET, this was a 12-year process of relentless struggle, extremely organized struggle, you know, revolutionary struggle. And at the end, IET defeated 3 European superpowers, which included the British, the Spanish, and finally the French. And so, and not only that, after the revolution, Jean-Jacques Dessalines said that any African, anywhere in the world, if you make it to Haiti, you will be free. That is what he said. He understood the question of the African nation. You know, he also sent Africans from Haiti itself into other parts of the world, into the US, into other islands, into other places in the Caribbean and what they call Latin America and South America, you know, to wage struggles, to teach people, to train people, and just to bring an organized process to the revolutions that they were trying to make there. This is Haiti. This is the real Haiti that the media does not want to talk about, because when you talk about Haiti that way, it informs Black people of not only what we really are, what we're capable of, but what we need to do today and what our solutions is. As Jouvenel just said, you know, our struggles are tied. And as you're going to hear the chairman say too, whether we are, you know, in Haiti, in the US, in Azania, or as people know it as South Africa, in the Congo, wherever we are, our struggle is one international African struggle. And that is what we have to be forging today. We have to be making this revolution. And so I know for me, you know, before I came to the party, before I came to the African People's Socialist Party, I never used this word, but after being in the party, I can recognize it, that I was a Haitian nationalist. You know, I was very serious. I was very serious about Haiti and just, you know, what I knew, you know, coming from a family from Haiti, speaking Creole, all these things. I was very passionate about that. And I was glad that I was eventually introduced to the theory of African internationalism that taught me that if I want to see victory for Haiti, you know, I have to see victory for all of Africa, you know, and that Haiti's victory is not going to be separate from any other place in the world. And that, you know, as significant and as great and wonderful as what Haiti did the first time in 1804, we're not going to be able to do it again by ourselves this time. We have to tie our struggle. And then, of course, I'm telling you, other African people too, that you have to stand, it's hard to say in solidarity because we're African people anyway, but in unity with the Africans of Haiti. We have to shut down all kinds of, you know, US intervention, shut down all of the slander and, you know, just the disrespect, even the way Africans from Haiti ourselves are treated. All of that has to be rejected. We have to recognize that as, you know, white power. And if we're going to say we're standing up for Black power, then we have to stand up for Africans in Haiti too. So I'm making a call for African people everywhere to join the African People's Socialist Party, adopt the theory of African internationalism as your own. And again, kupetet bulekai uhuru.
Uhuru Likia, kupetet bulekai. Thank you so much for this really incredible, informative presentation that you just delivered. And now we're going to go over to Comrade Director Tafari of the Director of Organization on the African Continent, Tafari Mugeri, to talk about the situation there. Uhuru, Chairman Tafari.
Uhuru, Comrade Akile Anai, Director Akile. I'd like to salute this program of the African People's Socialist Party, the vanguard of the International African Revolution, and I want to salute my leadership, Chairman Omali Eshitela, who is the leader and founder of the Uhuru Movement and the African People's Socialist Party, as well as the International African Revolution, Secretary General Louise Kinshasa, Deputy Chair Ona Zine Eshitela, and the entire, you know, central committee of the African People's Socialist Party. So as it has been said, I am Tafari Mugeri, and I'm the Director of Organization for the African People's Socialist Party in Africa, which is known as the African Socialist International internationally. And I'm going to speak on two things, Swaziland as well as South Africa. And these are two, you know, colonial entities, countries within Southern Africa, what is known as Southern Africa. And like if you are watching the news, I'm sure you are seeing that there's been like a lot of turmoil in Swaziland, firstly, and then now we have South Africa all over, like in most provinces, is people up and down, um, getting into shops, so-called looting and, like vandalizing the infrastructure, especially the shops in the shopping complexes and things like that, so there's a lot of discussions that I'm sure almost everyone in South Africa on social media who is, politically inclined or whatever, some who are not even politically inclined in that way, are talking about this and, all sorts of opinions of whether this is right or this is wrong. But then as the party, we have our political theory. We engage in questions of what's happening within this whole social system that was born through the attack on Africa. Like all the time, we have meetings on a weekly basis. We have political reports that we read from the chairman, Omali Hitela, and articles that are written from the Burning Spear newspaper. So this is something we're engaged with on a consistent basis. So I think the African People's Socialist Party is best equipped, to be able to respond and sum up the whole thing. So in Southern Africa, the first and foremost, we are colonized all over the world. Like Comrade Akile was like just narrating what's happening in Haiti, Eswatini as well. And this is all colonialism. African people, wherever we are, we colonized, and here as well. Because we hear some people talking about like during colonialism as if we were previously colonized, and the same thing that this South African government does, talking about us as previously disadvantaged people and so forth. But we're saying that we are not previously disadvantaged. We are colonized. We are colonial subjects, under white power, which is now in the form of neo-colonialism. So we're saying that the revolution in Southern Africa has not been completed. It was actually like sabotaged. It was crushed. And in terms of Southern Africa, it's in terms of the so-called independence. This is something that happened a bit late here compared to other parts of Africa, like Ghana, 1957, and in 1960, more than 17 countries become so-called independent and so forth. But then if you look at Southern Africa, you have Namibia, which was like virtually under South Africa for almost the entire 20th century. Then you have Mozambique becomes independent in the late 1970s, Zimbabwe in 1980, South Africa 1994. And, so this happened a bit late. But at the same time, if you look at African people here, we still like under like the same conditions, sometimes even worse conditions. We're still in the shanty towns. The rate of unemployment, youth unemployment in South Africa is like 74.7% unemployment of young people. And speaking of all the looting and so forth that they're referring to right now, they don't refer to like the existential colonial conditions that we live with on a daily basis here. So I just want to report in terms of what's happening in Swaziland. We know like Swaziland is referred to as a monarchy, right? They say it's a monarchy. So you have a king, King Mswati III, who's been there since the 1980s as the ruler. And this is someone who prefers to live a so-called lavish life. Like earlier, a few years ago, he bought like 19 like cars, so-called what is this name of this car, Rolls Royce and whatever. And he has many wives, and they all live comfortably. But masses of the people in Swaziland are in poverty, And now this struggle actually has been ongoing for a number of years. Even in the early 2000s, you heard about riots in Swaziland, people protesting on the streets, fighting and calling for democracy and so forth, But then if you look at Swaziland as well as in South Africa, there's no like revolutionary center as like the chairman has been speaking in terms of the USA in the late 1970s, like there's no revolutionary center. Even now, if you look at what's happening in terms of all the protests we've been seeing in Swaziland, you find that it is the African petty bourgeoisie that has, like the analysis of what's happening there. If you go to the news, the people who are interviewed there, they are from the petty bourgeois organizations and so forth. The African working class in Swaziland does not have an organization. We don't have an organization of our own there. And then you're gonna hear people talking more about democracy, that we want democracy in Swaziland, and we do want democracy. But then in our party, in our movement, we say self-determination is actually the highest expression of democracy. That's what we want. We want self-determination, because we're getting some people from the African petty bourgeois sectors of the African petty bourgeoisie in Swaziland, as well as here in South Africa, talking about what we need in Swaziland is for a South Africa there. We need what we have in South Africa must also be heard in Swaziland. Like, people in South Africa are free, they can vote and so forth. So that's what we need somehow in terms of Swaziland, but then they talk about South African democracy. But then when you walk on the streets in the townships, you don't see the democracy here. There is no democracy, because the people are like, there is no employment in terms of the formal employment. We have trash everywhere. Young people are rotting in jail right now as we speak. So there is no democracy. We are actually experiencing a dictatorship of the rulers here in South Africa, as well as we are experiencing the dictatorship of the rulers in Swaziland. So we're saying that the critical issue is still colonialism, and we define what's happening in Swaziland as neo-colonialism. So someone like King Swati is a neo-colonialist. He's not just simply a king. He's a neo-colonialist. And you find that even around him, you have a cycle of other neo-colonialists. Some of them, they refer to themselves as, They refer to themselves as ministers and so forth. But then we have heard some intellectuals talking about Swaziland in terms of it being feudalist. They say that we have to save Swaziland from the feudalism that it's experiencing there, some kind of backwardness and so forth. But then if you look at the mines in Swaziland, it's imperialism that's operating the mines there. The businesses that are there, the retail stores and so forth, you find that these are capitalist entities that function in Swaziland. So someone like King Swat and his government there is serving the same function as the ANC government here in South Africa. They are the gatekeepers. They are the ones that facilitate the whole administration, that ensure that our labor is being looted, exploited, as well as our resources being looted on a daily and consistent basis. So then the African people, the masses of African people in Swaziland are African workers. They're workers, our labor being exploited. We are the pedestal upon which the whole system rests, the whole capitalist system rests. The same way we are workers here in South Africa, we are workers in Detroit, we are workers in Nairobi, Kenya, or somewhere in Mombasa. We are African workers, so that's how we have to be able to recognize the struggle in Swaziland. So you had most recently, a student being murdered by the police there. And then the government tries to hide it in Swaziland, and people start protesting around that. And then it's not in places like Swaziland, you cannot even protest. You cannot protest. You're going to be told about things like there's no right of assembly and things like that. And then, but if you come to South Africa, you don't have a right of assembly here as well. If they find you in a corner, and then you're an African worker, you are suspicious to them, they're going to put you to jail. They can arrest you for marijuana, for example, but at the same time, they say marijuana is legal in South Africa. So you see that we don't know what democracy is. We don't know what the constitution is as well, as far as the African working class are concerned. And speaking of the constitution, just in terms of what's happening in South Africa, Jacob Zuma, you have riots everywhere. It's complete chaos. And some people are panicking, saying that, oh, this is a risk because people are going to lose their jobs, shops being looted, the country is in chaos, we need to protect the country. make sure that the country never gets destroyed and things like that. But if you look at South Africa was born through the attack on African people. You know, African people have no stake. The African working class has no stake in terms of the whole South Africa. And even in 1994, when the ANC took office in terms of the government, and then they wrote that 1996 constitution, the constitution cannot protect African people from being exploited, cannot protect African people from being, the African working class from being evicted, like mass evictions that we see on a weekly basis across South Africa. The constitution doesn't do that. And now Jacob Zuma is being he's convicted for defying the constitution. And some people are saying that Jacob Zuma is supposed to go to jail because he defied the South African constitution. And some people are saying that Jacob Zuma cannot go to jail because he is the leader that expresses the interests of the African masses. But Jacob Zuma was the president of South Africa for like 9 years. And within that 9 years, there was no effort made for African people to get our land back. No effort at all. There was no effort made for us to even get reparations or anything close to that. It was actually under Jacob Zuma that you had Andres Tatani in 2011 being killed by the police, and even now there's no justice in terms of those cops or even anyone charged around that case. It was in 2012 when Zuma was the president, when 34 mine workers were gunned down, and no one was convicted around that, and no one was charged, and even the families of those mine workers who were gunned down, African workers, are still going up and down trying to get compensation for that. And then yet he was president. He was the president when the current president of South Africa, the neo-colonialist Ramaphosa, was the deputy president to Jacob Zuma. They were comrades. This is the ANC. And now you have these radical, so-called radical black nationalists who are talking about Ramaphosa as a sellout, as an agent of the white monopoly capital, and making it seem as if the ANC is okay, and it was infiltrated by Sir Ramaphosa. But we're saying the ANC has been a petty bourgeois organization since inception, and since Mandela, whether it was under Mandela or it was under Mbeki or Zuma, it has been the ANC that has worked against the interest of the African working class. So we are not with the colonial state, and neither are we with the petty bourgeois ANC. We are with the mass of the African working class, and we're saying that what we need is a revolutionary organization. We need the African Socialist Party on the ground. We need the African Socialist Party in South Africa, in Swaziland, and all over, for African people to be able to realize our own interests and fight for our own class and national independence. I just want to read quickly and just to show that our party, our chairman, has been on the South Africa question for years, actually, even from the 1970s and so forth. But I want to read something from the chairman's visit in 2018 here in South Africa. And it says here, from the political report to the 7th Congress from 2018, Vanguard. And this is on page 221 or 227. It says about a public meeting that we had in Forgeville. The chairman says, young people were prominent features in Forgeville as well. All expressed the same disgust with the political establishment as in our first meeting. They recognized the fallacy of the so-called revolution that ended apartheid in South Africa, but left the minority white population in control of 87% of the land and most of means of the production. The discussion was very lively, and we continue to make the call for the African working class to get organized in the party and prepare to lead our own struggle in our own class and national interest. And then it says the question of corruption was raised by the attendees of the meeting, as people are very conscious of the issue of the former president Jacob Zuma and his connection with the prominent Indian capitalist. we explained that corruption is common with capitalism, but that the issue is not corruption. The issue is colonial capitalism, whence all the corruption springs. Even non-corrupt capitalism, if such a thing were possible, could not work with in the interest of the majority of the African working class. So this shows that Ramaphosa or Zuma, none of them can serve the interest of the mass of the people. We have to fight for a Black Power revolution, a socialist revolution, and all African revolution under the leadership of the African working class, led by the African People's Socialist Party. So I will end it there and just say uhuru.
Uhuru, Director Tafari, thank you so much for that critical presentation on the situation for African people currently in Southern Africa, giving emphasis to the statement made earlier by Sheila Moise that Haiti is an Africa question, and we're dealing with the global Black revolution when we're looking at all of these situations unfolding. So thank you so much. Now I'm going to go and bring up Penny Hess, who is the chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee, the organization of white people working under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. Uhuru, Penny.
Uhuru, thank you, Director Akile Anai. And I salute this powerful event. I salute the African People's Socialist Party and the struggle for African people to be free, liberated, and united all around the world. It is an honor to be able to be here today in this profound discussion. I salute all of the excellent and very moving presenters before me, Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa, the African Socialist International, Director of Organization for Africa for the African Socialist International, Tafari Mugeri, and Alikia Ngoma, the Haiti editor of the Burning Spear newspaper. And I salute my leadership, Chairman Omali Shatella, leader of the African Nation, Chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, and the African Socialist International, and our keynote speaker today. And I'm really looking forward to hearing the chairman's presentation, and as always, this profound African internationalist summation of the current situation. I also salute the powerful leadership of Deputy Chair of the African People's Socialist Party, Ona Zanea Shatella, under whose leadership and office all of us in the African People's Solidarity Committee carry out our daily work. And we express our profound unity with the resistance of the heroic African people of Haiti, of all throughout Africa, African people in the US and the world. And my responsibility as a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee is to talk about the role and the significance of the party's formation of the African People's Solidarity Committee, which was formed by the African People's Socialist Party and Chairman Omali Shatella back in 1976 for white people to organize in white communities wherever we are, to go behind enemy lines, not as a favor, not as something nice to do, but as a strategic front of the African Revolution. This is our task, our assigned task, to win other white people to recognize that we, white people, owe reparations to African people for the stolen lives, labor, wealth, resources, land, and genius of African people that have provided life and livelihood for us under this brutal colonial system for the past 600 years, and that the African Revolution is our leadership. This is so important because it is the political theory of African internationalism or Ishatellaism that allows us as white people to begin to hear what the members of the African People's Socialist Party are saying today and what it means for us, and to begin to see the world through the eyes of the organized African working class, to see the world not as we want it to be or what we learned through the lies of white society, but the world as it really is. African internationalism teaches us that the stark difference in the conditions of life for white people and African people, wherever you look, any place in the world, are welded together in one dialectical process that Chairman Omali Shatella has laid out. that capitalism was born of European colonialism, that white people leaving the shores of Europe began the assault on Africa in the 1400s with unprecedented violence, rape, plunder, kidnapping of African human beings, turning African people into commodities for sale, forcing them into labor, stealing their gold, their resources, their land, their genius. And that this assault began in the 1400s, and rapidly Europeans encircled the globe with genocide, slaughter, and terrorism, colonized the majority of the planet Earth. When white people came to South America, the Mayan people, the indigenous people, said that white people lust after gold like hungry swine. This is how capitalism was born. Chairman Omali Yeshitela tells us this is what rapidly transformed Europe from a desolate, impoverished, isolated, feudal place into the center of the world's wealth and power. This is colonialism. African people are colonized, which means they are occupied by a foreign and alien state power for the purpose of gathering wealth for the occupier. Thus, white people, us, we are the colonizers wherever we are. In Haiti, in South Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, the Caribbean, Australia, right here in the US, Canada, South America, and of course in Europe, wherever white people are, we are the colonizers. We owe reparations to African people, not because of charity, but because our every dream and aspiration, everything that we take for granted, our social wealth, our houses, our college education, even what we say, our ideas, every myth that we have about ourselves requires the police murders, starvation, mass imprisonment, and suffering of African and other colonized people throughout the world. And this is true whether we are white women, whether we are working, whether we are LGBTQ, we are the colonizers getting our rights on the backs of African and other colonized and oppressed peoples. And we have been complicit, we have participated in this hideous colonial violence against African people around the world, inside the US, from cutting off the hands of African people in colonized Congo by Belgium, or lynching African people right here in the US, or picking up the gun against the indigenous people anywhere in the Western Hemisphere. We have been part and parcel of the US government and imperialism's colonial strategy of violence, terror, genocide, and colonialism against African indigenous people. And we want to salute the historic, successful African Revolution of Haiti, victorious in 1804, which we have heard about so eloquently so far. And Chairman Omali Yeshitela has shown us that the African Revolution of Haiti was one of the greatest revolutions in the history of the world. It was a revolution led by African workers who themselves were the property of the colonizers. And as Chairman Omali Yeshitela says, that means that they themselves were the means of production, or the mode of production of the capitalist system, forced to produce the vast wealth for France in what France called the Pearl of the Antilles, made French people wealthy in France and white people around the world. And the Haiti Revolution, and when they gained state power, they turned the colonial system right side up. They put white people under the leadership of the African working class state, and they actually liquidated colonial whiteness, or this concept of racism, by declaring in Haiti, in the Haitian Constitution, that all citizens shall be known as Black. So if white people would live in Haiti, they were under the leadership of the African working class. And French and US imperialism has punished Haiti ever since, forcing Haiti, with the complicity of the white population of the US, France, Britain, and the world, to pay reparations to France, as has been said, for African people stealing themselves, which was their property. They had to pay reparations, quote unquote, in the form of billions of dollars of solid gold coin for the stolen property, which was African people themselves. The US has occupied and looted Haiti repeatedly and done many horrible things, including allowing former President William Jefferson Clinton to steal the millions, if not billions of dollars that was raised from people supporting the people of Haiti in the wake of the 2010 earthquake there. And we also salute the uncompleted African Revolution in its front in occupied Azania and throughout the continent of Africa that is destined to liberate Africa under the leadership of the African working class and the African People's Socialist Party. The liberation and unification of Africa and African people everywhere is the mission of the African People's Socialist Party. The African Revolution is the anti-imperialist movement of the whole world, the only force capable of destroying this violent, deadly imperialist system that brings so much suffering to the planet, which is even destroying this planet. Only the African Revolution can and will usher in true socialism in the world. So I say this to white people everywhere, to the colonizers like myself. If we want to change the world, if we want to be part of a future on a planet without the oppressor and the oppressed, the African Revolution is our revolution, uplifting all others. The African Revolution is the revolution of the world. White people are not going to make some kind of revolution of colonizers. And as Chairman Omali Shatella has solved the problems of the revolution and answered the question, what about the white people? He taught us that the working class of the world is in the colonies. The working class of the world is the African and colonized working class, the true working class leading the worldwide revolutionary struggle. We sit on the pedestal of this oppression and can get organized under their leadership. Finally, I want to say it is profoundly in our interest to join the African Revolution and our assigned front inside the colonizer nation and our self-imposed exile from the rest of humanity, make our self-criticism to African people through reparations, returning the stolen loot, carry out our strategic mission behind enemy lines, returning the stolen resources, the African Revolution, which is in the process of taking self-government, self-determination, and freeing the world from this vicious, parasitic capitalist system forever. Victory to African people, victory to the African People's Socialist Party around the world. Go to uhurusolidarity.org for more information about the African People's Solidarity Committee and Uhuru Solidarity Movement. Unity through reparations. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you so much, Penny. That was Chairwoman Penny Hess from the African People's Solidarity Committee. Want to appreciate that presentation. And now it is my profound honor to bring up the leader of the African nation, the chairman of the African People's Socialist Party and the African Socialist International, the person who single-handedly kept it on his shoulders to complete African liberation, to unite Africa and African people everywhere in one liberated socialist state under the leadership of the African working class. Uhuru, Chairman Omali Shatella.
Uhuru, thank you so very much, Comrade Director Akile, for the introduction. I want to express my really deep and profound appreciation to all of the presenters up to now. And to remind us that this is not just some casual discussion that you might find happening around issues of Haiti. In particular, it has gathered a lot of attention, particularly in the United States, while not so many people are conscious of as we see, hear of the struggles in Southern Africa. But I want to say that this is a really important discussion by people under the leadership of a revolutionary political party. And our objective is not simply to provide information and empty kinds of analysis. We unite with something that Karl Marx has said, that these people in the past, philosophers have simply defined the world, interpreted the world. The point is to change it. And that's what we say, that we are African internationalists. Philosophically, that's who we are. And I'm mentioning this thing about philosophy because that's something that our oppressors have succeeded in pushing off the agenda, so that it's not important what you believe in. It is not important to what end you are struggling. And that's how our struggles get taken over so often by people who call themselves nice, or who can provide a civil rights bill or make a good speech and then say, this is where you should go, because our movement has generally been ideologically or philosophically untethered. And this has not happened accidentally. It's happened because those revolutionaries who've tried to provide a to what end? What is it that we're fighting for? What is it that the ultimate aim of this revolutionary movement? Those forces have been maligned and murdered, etc. So we are African internationalists. And this discussion we're having today is part of our process of engaging in political work to change the world. And it is a part of a process of winning African people ourselves under the leadership of the African working class to take possession of our future through organization. And this is important discussion because for the first time in the history of our people since Marcus Garvey, we have the African working class has its own party that is fighting for the interests of the class. And like all parties, we are a class-based party. There's no such thing as a party that can exist outside of the context of the societies in which we exist. And we exist in a colonial-capitalist world economy. And there are classes there. And all parties are led by classes. And parties are led by what are considered the advanced detachment or the advanced sector, if you will, of a particular population. That's true for the bourgeoisie as well. It's the advanced sector. All of the bourgeoisie do not participate in bourgeois organization or bourgeois parties. It's just that advanced sector that participate. The majority of the bourgeoisie, you will find they're drunkards and they are slackers, dope addicts, and just fiends, dishonest fiends, etc. But they're and don't give a damn. The majority are not concerned about what's happening in South Africa, Haiti, what's happening in Mississippi or Detroit. The majority of them are simply gluttons who take advantage of the resources that they steal from us and the oppressed peoples of the world, but they have their parties. And their parties are led by that advanced sector of the population. And the same thing has to be true of the African working class. We have our own party. Under Garvey, the Universal Negro Improvement Associations and African Communities League function as a global African party, united the whole African nation under the leadership of the African working class. One single organization that shook the whole imperialist system to its foundation. And the African population, the workers now, for the first time since Garvey, we have our own party and tethered to a philosophy that promises victory for African people and the death of a social system based off our enslavement. So I just think this is who we are talking with today. These are representatives of that movement, of that practical work that has to happen on a regular basis, of that organized process of making this happen, not just discussion. If that's the only thing that you are interested in is just having somebody talk about something, then you're in the wrong place. Because the truth of the matter is part of what distinguishes the African People's Socialist Party is that we have a philosophy, but we say that philosophy is meaningless if it cannot be implemented in the world, if it cannot be materialized in the world. So we are here to change the world. We are leaders of a revolutionary movement that is designed to put the African working class in power, to become a governing class that will lead the struggle for the liberation of the African nation globally. So I want to say that. And also, and that's everybody on here, as you will see. play some role in making that happen. It's a part of a whole strategic trajectory led by the African People's Socialist Party. I think it's important. I mentioned the whole issue of African internationalism, our philosophy. And one of the distinguishing things about our philosophy is the fact that we recognize the significance of colonialism, but that's not enough, because a lot of people are able to talk about colonialism, and even white liberals talk about colonialism, and Black liberals talk about colonialism, and it's naughty, or something to that effect. We're not talking about colonialism in that way. We're talking about colonialism as the foundation of the whole colonial-capitalist system. Capitalism came into existing resting on this foundation of colonial slavery that captured Africa, captured African people, dispersed us around the world, that created what we now know as the Americas, destroyed so many of the indigenous population, and created what we now call countries in the process of creating a global economy based on African enslavement. We're talking about a social system. And it's really important for us to understand this, because one of the reasons we get pushed around so much, and by people who are supposed to be those who love us, etc., is that we do not understand our own consequence in the world. We do not understand our own significance in the world as a powerful political and economic force, as a powerful social force upon which the whole rotten system rests. Some people from our population have understood this. And Dessalines, that was mentioned earlier, Kupete Boulekai, he understood this. He understood this perhaps better than anybody involved in the Haitian Revolution. And this was one of the most magnificent, most significant assaults that was made on the whole capitalist system. It happened right there in Haiti, where during a time where colonial slavery was the dominant economy. It was the global economy revolved around colonial slavery. The whole world economy as it exists now, we're talking about the world economy, revolved around colonial slavery. And when the Haitian Revolution happened, and Africans in Haiti, workers took power. Black workers took power, some of whom did not speak French and would have been characterized as illiterate under standards that people, especially the petty bourgeoisie, like to throw at us today, took power and then changed the world. And when they took power, it was something that shook the entire global economy. The economy of the world was shaken by that. It was shaken because, as it was said, that Haiti was this lucrative looting entity that was characterized by France as the pearl of the Antilles. They didn't talk about Haiti being the poorest place in the world. They talked about it being the pearl. This is where all kinds of loot. This fed white people in France. This is the thing that made it possible for those outside cafes, sidewalk cafes that France likes to brag about to occur. But it did more than that, because Africans who had been captured in colonial slavery in Haiti, some of whom were in Haiti, were also in France at the time of the so-called French Revolution. And it was some of the philosophical involvement, intervention by Africans there that gave shape and form to the so-called French Revolution. I know that's been talked about most of the time differently, and it is assumed that enslaved Africans in Africa, in Haiti rather, came to understand and appreciate the question of freedom because of slogans that came from the French Revolution, for the revolution of colonizers who were living off the blood of African people in Haiti. So I want us to understand this, that we're talking about solving the problem of the revolution. And we're talking about a world that came into existence through colonialism. This is the birth of the whole colonial capitalist system, the system that we live under today. Peoples around the world are dominated by the world, and the world today came into existence through colonial slavery, colonialism. And so after the colonial enslavement of African people, of the assault on Africa that dispersed Africans throughout the world. We see that European colonialism around the world is the way that this accumulation of resources that Karl Marx would refer to as the primitive accumulation of capital that was necessary for capitalism to come into existence, that he said had the same equivalent in political economy as original sin in theology. That colonialism, or this turning of Africa into a warren for the commercial of hunting of black skins. And then he gave other kinds of examples of attacks on peoples around the world that brought all kinds of resources to Europe that changed the world. And this was the process that dragged feudal Europe into a new place and connected the whole world into a single economy. And I can't say enough about feudal Europe, because we're talking about Europe. They used to call it the Dark Ages during this time. And Europe was living under the worst kinds of impoverished, disease-ridden despotism that you can imagine. And in Europe, which cannot brag about the kinds of material resources that it has as its command in Europe, we had situations where people literally went a system that lasted for close to 1,000 years, where people were so poor that many of them actually went naked because they had nothing to wear. So this is the Europe that prides itself now as being the beacon of civilization and democracy, that would have you believe that they could solve the problem in Haiti, that would have the world to believe that Africans are catching hell in Haiti because the white people lost power there, and that Africans in South Africa are involved in this huge struggle because the white people are not formally in power there. This is what they would have us to believe, when the truth of the matter is that Europe has some bare semblance of stability as a consequence of this attack on Africa and African people globally. So this is what we're looking at. We are African internationalists, and we say that the whole social system, capitalism, all your communist friends, all the white people who love you, who talk about how they oppose to capitalism, and capitalism is the problem in Haiti, and capitalism is the problem for everything we see. They have to be made to recognize and to admit that all the capitalism that they're talking about has as its foundation the enslavement of colonized Africans and peoples around the world. Can you imagine the existence of capitalism without the theft of this land that we are on now, that white people are not indigenous to this land that has, even as early as something like the 17th, 16th century, killed, like 56 million indigenous people. This land that we live on, can you imagine capitalism without Haiti? Capitalism without what the colonial domination of what we refer to as Venezuela of the United States? It's impossible to imagine, because it couldn't have happened. It happened. This is where the resources came from. This is what created the whole social system. So all of what you see in terms of political and ideological and economic articulations around the world, the whole global world, the whole world political and economic configurations owes itself to colonial slavery, colonial capitalism. Colonialism is the basis for that. And under this system, because now it's no longer just the France, it's no longer just in England, it's no longer just these single entities out there by themselves. The world is now locked into a single economy, and it has to obey. It obeys rather the same laws of social development as if it were a single state that we are talking about. In fact, most of what we know as Europe now came into existence through colonialism. So this is the world that we live with, and capitalism was born as a global system. It wasn't just something that happened in some place in Manchester, in England, or something that happened in some peculiar place. It emerged as a global system. And that's the mode of production, the colonial capitalist. The colonial capitalism is what we live under today. And it is something that came into existence by this mode of production that up to now has been a mystery in the development and discussion of the development of capitalism as it's been characterized as a mode of production. What dragged Europe out of this feudal misery that it existed in was colonialism. And colonialism is a mode of production. It created a whole new world economy emerged around colonialism. So that's what we're talking about. And everything that happens, all the politics, all the struggles. So we see something happening in Haiti now. And the government overturned the assassination of the president, who was a neo-colonial president. There's no way you can paint that differently. He was a neo-colonial president. You see happening in South Africa where Jacob Zuma, who was of the African National Congress, has gone to jail. And then you see and Zuma, who was perceived by some to be this great anti-apartheid revolutionary, etc., and who became president, and now he's gone to jail. But all of this happens within the structures of the whole colonial capitalist system. Nothing that happened in South Africa overturned that system. To just get rid of apartheid, which is what the ANC proclaimed to have done, and which is what all the liberals were wanted to happen. To just get away around apartheid was to simply get around the form of the colonial state, the form of the state. And after that was overturned, the apartheid state was overturned, which meant that now the colonialism, the capitalist system in South Africa, it has Black managers as opposed to the white settler managers who were there holding the political reins. And this is something, of course, that happened as a consequence of more and more Africans coming to a revolutionary consciousness. And in order to head it off, to give people something short of the revolution, to give them a constitution, and to give them Black people managing the same system of exploitation and oppression that used to be managed by white people. Same situation there. Look at the conditions of African people there. And white people still own the vast majority of the land there and still have the vast majority of the resources there. And the working people are still oppressed and still living in shacks and shanties while all kinds of resources are dragged from the earth on a regular basis that go to white people, to Europe, to the colonizer. It's the form of the state changed. So they call it a democratic state now. They have things like, I think, rights for homosexuals and rights for, and I'm just saying this because that's characterized as a progressive thing in most of the capitalist countries. And there's nothing, as Comrade Tafari mentioned earlier, that provides nothing for the African working class or for the majority of the African people overall. It's the same system. And so I wanted to mention that. And it's important for us to be having this discussion today because we are approaching the 50th anniversary of the African People's Socialist Party. And for the totality of our existence, we have been waging these struggles that we are talking about now. And this panel on this forum today represent a strategic approach that we have made to this struggle to win these aims of overturning a social system based on the enslavement of African people. So this is the 50th anniversary, again, that we're approaching. And I wanted to say that what you see happening in Haiti could very well be the petty bourgeois fighting among themselves inside the same social system, and you end up crying over this one as opposed to that one. It could very well be that. It could be something that might be considered even more sinister in terms of a certain direct kind of intervention. You got a situation in the world today because the whole, it is a global colonial capitalist system that things are running amok as far as white power is concerned. Everything is in disarray. The crisis is so deep, there's no place you can look in the world for white power that is not responsible for some crisis that's been experienced by white power. Whether that's what's happening with the people in China who are encroaching on what white power has considered in the United States in particular, its domain in Africa in terms of economic advancements there, and also in Asia. However that looks, what we are seeing as this crisis, this deep crisis. You can see it in Venezuela. You can see it in Colombia, masses of people rising up in Colombia against that setup that the United States government is primarily responsible for. You can see a crisis happening as a consequence of the US having to get out of Afghanistan after more than 20 years, 25 years or so, making war against that impoverished people and still unable to conquer and losing ground throughout the Middle East. This is a whole nasty crisis for them. The crisis that they have to contend with in Iran, whose future they were determined to, determined to define for themselves through the overthrow in the 1950s of Mohammad Mossadegh, and put in place the person who the Iranians, the Shah, who the Iranians had to eventually overturn to be able to take some custody of their country for a bit of a time. Now the U.S. has lost that. The U.S. has lost Iraq. And so it's experiencing serious crisis. And every time it loses one place, we see strength being gathered, momentum being gathered for revolutionary movement in other places. So part of what we will be seeing in some instances is the U.S. and the imperialist forces moving to try to cut their losses, moving to get rid of, as Comrade Elikia mentioned earlier, any even neo-colonial puppet that was supposed to be serving them. If that force has become a liability, if that presence there, it has led to masses of people rising up with the potential of the government being overthrown and then somebody coming into power, some force coming into power that would work against the interests of the United States, then you can see how they would have an interest in getting rid of Jouvenel. And that may or may not offer some explanations for this strange event that occurred there, the so-called with the assassination of Jouvenel, and by what they call this a squad of professional hit persons that was so professional that they killed him, according to their story, and some 20 of them just hang around waiting to go to jail and get captured, etc. With no exit plan, nothing, etc. So anyway, that's part of how I think we have to understand this, and we have to understand the need to build the African Socialist International, so that every place in the world African can be engaged in making a revolution. Revolution is the only way forward. We're going to have to take power. We're going to have to create new social systems. We're going to have to understand that even within our colonized communities, there are sectors who have different class interests than the majority of the people. They have been created by this relationship, by this imposition of this economy born of colonialism being imposed on us, and having a sector of the population given it a stake in the continuing existence of this whole social system. I want to share this with you because I'm saying a lot of stuff, and I hope to give some theoretical background basis for what it is that we do, but we're not just talking theory. And so I want to read for you briefly. This is from A New Beginning, which is the road to Black freedom and socialism, which is the main resolution or political report to the first Congress of the African People's Socialist Party that happened in 1982. And this was the resolution that was passed then, that speaks to the question of Haiti, that speaks to the question of South Africa, as quiet as it's kept. We were not observers of the South African, the so-called revolutionary movement in South Africa. We were part of it. We were part of, and many times we were the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania in the United States. We were there at the United Nations in every instance fighting, and fighting also not just to represent their voice in forums that we created or we shared with them, or in at the United Nations, but also to fight against the African National Congress, whose petty bourgeois credentials were much clearer than what we might have found in the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azani. We were there. We were part of it up until the time of the negotiated peace. And even with the negotiated peace, the discussions that happened within the movement from so-called South Africa, occupied Azani, we were involved in those discussions. We were struggling around those questions, and we were opposed to the acceptance of the negotiated peace. So we were there. We've been working around the question of Haiti forever. We have tried not only to bring, at one point, the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania, going back so many years into the African Socialist International, but also representatives from Haiti who were involved in the struggle there. We tried to win and bring into organization as a part of the African Socialist International. None of this is new to us, and none of this is just something that we discuss and talk about. We believe that the African Revolution is one revolution, and not only is it the African Revolution, it is the leadership of the world revolution. Because the entire global economy revolves around colonialism, and African people are so strategically located as a consequence of the attack on Africa that dispersed African people all around the world. And every place you find us, in the Americas, throughout South America, throughout the Caribbean, throughout Africa, Europe, and in the United States, every place you find us, we are suffering. And what we lack is revolutionary organization that is guided by advanced revolutionary theory. And that's what this is about. That's what all the work that we've been doing is about as well. So I just want to quickly read this. This is a resolution from the first Congress of the African People's Socialist Party that was held in Oakland, California in September 1982. The African Socialist International. For several hundred years now, African people have had to endure the worst possible forms of political oppression and economic exploitation. This oppression and exploitation have their origin in the brutal attack on Africa by European bandits and merchants who initiated the capture and sale of Black men, women, and children into slavery throughout the Americas and the Western world, and who captured the continent of Africa itself, the national homeland of all Black people, divided into illegitimate geographical state territories, divided it into illegitimate geographical state territories, which facilitated foreign political domination, frustrated and distorted the process of achieving national consolidation, and created new exploitative economic structures, which have resulted in a historical and massive transfer of human and material resources from Africa and African people to the centers of the imperialist empire led by US imperialism. This oppression and exploitation of African people gave birth to a world economy and the international capitalist system, which in its most developed form is known as imperialism and is led by the US. It is this system of imperialism built and developed of the blood, sweat, and liberty of African people, which is responsible for the underpopulation, grinding poverty, and underdevelopment of Africa. This system is also responsible for African people being oppressed and exploited throughout the world, dominated by foreigners, aliens, and capitalism, and prevented from achieving national liberation and the consolidation of our nationality itself. Today, Africa is a center of political turmoil and turbulence, as African people in one place after the other are throwing off the chains of oppression and struggling to break the exploitative economic structures developed off those which were created during the slave trade and the colonization of Africa. This struggle in Africa is also creating turmoil within the centers of world capitalism, led by US imperialism. This struggle is part and parcel of the leading force in history today, the force of the ascendancy of the slave, the struggles of the world's peoples to throw off colonialism, neo-colonialism, and economic dependence. The struggle to throw off colonialism, neo-colonialism, and economic dependency represents the most serious threat to imperialist domination and economic exploitation of all the workers and toiling masses of the world. They represent a threat, a direct attack on the economic and political structures which are necessary for the very existence of this oppressive and exploitative system of imperialism, structures which have their origin in the slave trade, the colonization of Africa, and the dispersal of African people throughout the world. The present conditions of existence of African people throughout the world are a result of the development of economic and political structures which gave birth to the capitalist system and which led Karl Marx to the observation more than 100 years ago that, quote, direct slavery is just as much the pivot of bourgeois industry as machinery, credits, etc. Without slavery, you have no cotton. Without cotton, you have no modern industry. It is slavery that has given the colonies their value. It is the colonies that have created world trade. And it is world trade that is the precondition of large-scale industry. Thus, slavery is an economic category of the greatest importance. Without slavery, North America, the most progressive of countries, would be transformed into a patriarchal country. Wipe out North America from the map of the world, and you will have anarchy, the complete decay of modern commerce and civilization. Cause slavery to disappear, and you will have wiped America off the map of nations. So I just wanted to share that with you and say that this resolution made this call. It says, the African People's Socialist Party calls on all African revolutionaries of all countries to unite with us into one African Internationalist Socialist Association, which would enhance our ability to realize our historic mission to free and unite our people in motherland and to defeat imperialism and issue in a new day of peace, freedom, and world socialism. The African People's Socialist Party calls on all African revolutionaries in all countries to unite with us into one African International Socialist Association, which would assume the task of one, liberating and uniting all of Africa under a single all-African socialist state. Two, uniting, coordinating, and giving general assistance and direction for the revolutionary struggles of all African people wherever they occur, and whenever the aims of such struggles are consistent with the aims of the International Socialist Association. And three, achieving the objective consolidation of African nationality for all African people wherever we are oppressed and exploited throughout the world due to the machinations of imperialism. Africans of the world, take history in your hands. Africans of the world, unite to build the African Socialist International. This is the resolution from the first Congress of the African People's Socialist Party held in 1982. However, I just think it's important to state that though this resolution came about in 1982, that the party has been incessant in fighting for the liberation of our Africa and recognition that we are one people, one Africa, making this common struggle. So I just wanted to say that, and to say that while this called for revolutionary forces around the world to do this, they didn't exist, but the African Socialist International does exist. And we exist not only in the United States, we are also in Southern Africa, we are in West Africa, we are in East Africa, and growing in various other places of Africa. And we are also in the Caribbean. We are in Europe. We are in various places. So the objective is to build the capacity to take our own freedom. Because like you, I'm tired of just simply having to come to empty discussions and hoping that somebody will intervene or something will intervene to our benefit. Recognize that Africa will be free by leadership of the African working class that has access and control of its own revolutionary organization in the form of the African People's Socialist Party, which is an organization of professional revolutionaries who come from different kinds of occupations, but whose profession is revolution, whose commitment to the overturning of this oppression of our people, to uniting with the oppressed peoples of the world, with others who are colonized. This commitment is ironclad, and our objective is to win. Our objective is to take power over our own lives. Our objective is to put the power to govern and the actual capacity to govern in the hands of the African working class. With that, Izwe Letu, Africa, one nation, Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman. Uhuru, thank you so much for this incredible presentation. I just want to salute this presentation and your leadership, giving us the tools to understand the world as it is, the current crisis of colonial capitalism and what it means that colonialism is a mode of production for the capitalist system. And this lets African people and others know how the world got this way and that African internationalism is a theory of practice. So we have to do something. And with that, I just want to make a serious call to all of those who are watching. As it was stated, this is not just an event to have some discussion around these issues in the world, but this is a call to do something. This was put together for us to understand what we're seeing in the world, to negate all of the bourgeois lies the colonial media is, pushing out to sum up the situation. It's to provide the African response, our response to the situation in the world, and our solution. And that solution is the African Revolution, and you can be a part of it. So we're not in the business of just talking to talk. We are about the business of bringing people to a clear understanding of what they're seeing in the world, what we are experiencing, and to bring us to this conclusion that African Revolution is the only way to free us of the situation that we're in under this colonial domination and all of, all of the ways that manifests itself in our life. So you need to join the African People's Socialist Party if you're tired of what it is that you're saying. And to understand that the crisis of the system, as it was stated, is not our crisis, but in fact, it's the evidence that the struggles of colonized people to kill the colonizer, to rid ourselves of colonialism, it's evidence that that struggle is working, that that struggle is just, and the work of the African People's Socialist Party and the leadership of Chairman Malia Shatella is bringing us closer and closer to the inevitable defeat of the system that has been built on our backs, that has been living off of our existence for the past 600 years. And we have the African People's Socialist Party. We have the African Socialist International. We are not in the same place that we were in just decades ago. The leadership of the party is here, and we are calling on African workers of the world to unite and organize under the leadership of the African working class so that we can complete the Black Revolution of the 60s, since we can finish what we started, and we can see that the crisis of imperialism, the crisis of colonial capitalism continues to be deepened every single day. You play a part in that. Your role is to finish the job and to join in this struggle. So go to apspuhuru.org and fill out our contact form right now. If you haven't, are understanding what you're hearing and you're uniting with the theory of African internationalism and you want to do something, go to apspuhuru.org, fill out that contact form. It doesn't matter where you're located, no matter where you are on the earth. You've seen the presence of African leadership of this party from all over the world in this today. We have Chairman Amalia Shatella and Alikia in the US. We have Secretary General Louisa Kinshasa in Europe. We have Comrade Tafari, Chairman Tafari in Africa. So we are uniting African people all around the world, the practical unity of Africans all around the world. And so it doesn't matter where you're located. You want to join the African Revolution, then go to apspuhuru.org and fill out that contact form, and we will get with you. We will organize with you, organize in your communities, and bring us one step closer to our inevitable freedom. So with that being said, again, apspuhuru.org, join the African Revolution, join this struggle. And just want to also just say what an incredible webinar this has been. It's been informative. It's been mobilizing, lighting on fire under everybody who is watching, lighting on fire under me, to really be able to see this how connected this whole struggle is, that Africans, when we come to this conclusion, we're no longer isolated in these places, but we can see ourselves as one people struggling against the same system. And we can see that our numbers, our strength is so much greater than that of colonialism. We can organize and defeat colonialism. African internationalism has given our struggle a direction, a clear direction, a trajectory. And, we don't have to sweat it any longer. This is where we need to be in this time. And I just really appreciate us having this webinar, because so many people have questions and so many people in the world today want to do something about what it is that they see. And the party is, the clear vehicle to make that happen. And we've been providing the leadership for the past 50 years to bring people to the conclusions that they're coming to today. So this webinar was just a part of that whole process to bring Africans into the African Revolution. So I just want to salute this webinar. I want to salute our panelists. And I know that you all in the comment sections who are watching on YouTube, Facebook, on with us through Zoom, that you have questions, and this is your turn to get involved by asking those in the chat. And if you have not submitted your question yet, go ahead and type that into the chat section of whatever platform that you're watching on. And if your question is directed at a particular person on the panel, please write their name in your question or comment so that we know who to ask. So we're going to go to one of our first questions that came in, and this is from Comrade Morlai. And he asked, Secretary General, how can the revolution in Haiti be of example to the capitalist system in Africa? So that's from Comrade Morlai, I believe in Sierra Leone.
Yeah, would you like to repeat the question again? How the revolution in Haiti can be an example to the capitalist system?
Yeah, how can it be an example to the capitalist system in Africa?
Yes.
Yeah.
Everyone, not just in Africa, but every Black person needs to know about the African Revolution in Haiti. It's known as the Haitian Revolution. It needs to be taught. We, the African People's Socialist Party, that's what we're doing. It is even part of this process is to introduce it to our people, that we need to know the significance of that revolution, because if we understand it, then as the chairman said, the understanding Jacques Dessalines had, he understood that the French, the US, the whole colonial-capitalist system rested on colonial slavery. Basically, France, to be France, depended on the resources being stolen from Africans in Haiti and other places. French Revolution could not have happened without the resources stolen from Haiti, as they used to call it, the pearl of the Antilles. Africa need to understand that, because by extension, since the struggle in Haiti, the struggle for African people in Haiti is an exportation, if I might say, of the assault, of the attack on Africa. That's where it started. And basically what is pointing to Africa, the African nation, basically the exploitation of African people, colonization of Africa, colonization of African people being the foundation that took Europe out of poverty, that created Europe, that basically created what we see today, Belgium, France, England, capitalism, as we know, industrializations, and so on. So it means that our struggle, our successful struggle, a unification of Africa will bring this parasitic capitalist colonial system down. African freedom cannot coexist with white power colonialist capitalist system. They cannot coexist. One comes at the expense of the other. And also to understand that Haitian Revolution was the first workers' revolution, but it could not succeed because we did not have what we building today, international organization to eradicate this colonial system. It didn't exist at the time. So Africans in Haiti have to fight by themselves, could not have the benefit of Africans, dispersed around the world. But what we're building now is to have access, and we're having access to Africans elsewhere, so we can definitely build and complete the Black Revolution as a part of one trajectory organized by one party and under one philosophy, under one discipline, and with one aim: complete the Black Revolution and build and consolidate the African nation as a process to usher in the struggle for world socialism. So that's where we are. These really is some of the big lessons people need to internalize and reject the opportunist claim by what we call the white left, that the workers in Europe are going to lead the revolution. They will not. That's what Haiti is telling us. We, the colonized Africans, we have to lead our own revolution, and also in the same times usher in a new era in the struggle for world socialism. Or
may I just speak briefly to that as well? I mean, not directed to that, but it's related, and it's related to another thing that I see in the chat about what do we think about what's happening in Tigray, and then you can mention Tigray, you can talk about Cameroon. There are all of these things that are out there, and they're all connected to the same contradiction, and the fundamental contradiction that we are confronted with, whether in Tigray, whether in a place formerly known as Swaziland, etc., is that we don't have access, or most of the people do not have access, or the party is not on the ground in all of these places. There is not going to be. I mean, you can fight like hell in Tigray. You can claim that the Amharic or this group or that group is more responsible for some kind of ethnic prejudices that they, put forward, that, then there's Eritrea, that's involved in this. You got all this stuff that's happening. You got what Kermit Tafari was talking about, the so-called monarchy, in Swaziland on the one hand. So you got monarchy in Swaziland, you got a democratic state, as they would have us to believe, in South Africa. You have just all of this chaos there. And the masses end up fighting against their own interests, because you got sectors of the petty bourgeoisie, Tigrayan, sectors of the petty bourgeoisie who might come from some other ethnic group in Ethiopia, sectors of the petty bourgeoisie, who come, from different sectors, from different places. But the problem is, before Africa, there is not going to be any Tigrayan liberation. There's not going to be any Tigrayan revolution. The fact is that when they fracture us like this and lock us into these definitions and lock us into these actual areas of control and authority with governments that rest on a foundation of the colonial-capitalist system, we can't find our way forward. The people can't find their way forward. So you got the people who are workers, toilers, who might be called Tigrayan, Amharic, or any other ethnic groups. Then they're fighting for what? What the hell are they fighting for? They're not fighting for Africa. They're fighting for some sector of the bourgeoisie as it's of international capital, as it's reflected through the power of the petty bourgeoisie. Whatever that petty bourgeoisie, how many Africans kill each other in Kenya in this incredible, this ridiculous struggle, in the name, this so-called ethnic violence, where it's just one sector of the petty bourgeoisie who may be Lua or something else, and who's felt left out, who could not get access to what the hell he wanted. So he mobilizes other people whose now primary identity, as opposed to being African, even as opposed to being Kenyan, their primary identity is connected to some ethnicity that locks us into a state of permanent stasis. We don't go anywhere at all. So the thing is, what I think about Tigray is what I think about Haiti, what I think about South Africa and the various other places. These are places, and when I think about Detroit and other places, these are places that do not have full access to the party. The party, if anything, I would make a self-criticism. because we have to take this revolution to the masses of people. We got to stop Africans from killing each other in Ethiopia somehow, because there's supposed to be some progressive versus a reactionary ethnic leader in Ethiopia or Eritrea. We're fighting for the petty bourgeoisie. And the African working class has to have its own vision. And it has its own vision and its own capacity through the intervention of its advanced detachment, the Revolutionary Party. That's what has to happen. And so in terms of Tigray, in terms of Cameroon and all the other places that we just mentioned, in terms of of South Africa, and when I say South Africa, I'm talking about the colonial construct there. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the colonial construct. In terms of all of these places, we have to put the African Revolution down the ground, put the party down the ground. That's what Comrade Tafari is about. And that's what Comrade Secretary John Luizy is about, and Comrade Ilikia. And then we have Comrade Penny Hess. And I'm mentioning Penny Hess because as Comrade Luizy said that Haiti is the African Revolution or the whole issue of the African Revolution. The fact is that Africa represents the world revolution. If there is going to be any solution to this outstanding contradiction that many people who call themselves communists and socialists are dealing with, this whole notion of how to resolve the question of socialism in one country, you can't resolve the question of socialism in one country. There is not going to be any legitimate socialism in one country. You can have socialists who might take power in one country, but you don't have socialism because the world economy is a colonial-capitalist economy. It dominates the whole world. So what we have to do as Africans, what makes the African Revolution so critical is the strategic location that we have. When I say strategic, I'm not inventing this. I'm saying that the world colonial capitalist system, through the whole process of colonial slavery and dispersing us all around the world, they dispersed us where? They put us to work and put us in different places where that was strategic to the economy, to the development of the European economy, even if it was called France or called England. All of these places that we were thrust into were strategic to development of the European economy. That means European life. And so this is what constructed the whole colonial capitalist system. It was based off, again, colonialism as a mode of production. And this is what's going to bring it down, the organization. And it's not something that you just talk about, you make it happen. It's the will of the masses of our people, the aspirations of the masses of our people for freedom, for democracy, for control of our own resources. Those aspirations can only be achieved through the will of the cadre of the African People's Socialist Party, Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, and Uhuru, Secretary General Luizy. So in order to make sure that we get to some of the other questions here, we'll go ahead and move, but I just really want to appreciate those answers. So we have a question from Arvi, and Arvi asked, Jouvenel Moise was part of a group called FRAF. It was one of the CIA death operations that was created in 1990. It's created a lot of chaos. Any in-depth view on into this? And he poses that to Secretary General Luizy, but everyone can chime in. You're muted, SG.
Yeah, missed the end of it, but I understand the President Moise, Jouvenel Moise, was a part of a death squad, put it this way. Yeah, I will not be surprised if that was the case, because I know when Aristide, Jean-Bertrand Aristide was overthrown, the United States basically created chaos there. They created a death squad, and I remember Raoul. I don't remember if his name was Cedric, but there was someone of the name of Raoul, another one Philippe. They were part of the death squad to make sure the struggle in Haiti does not develop, so that they can go in the working class area, kidnap people, kill people, people disappeared, things like that. The United States did that. What we say basically, when you see the 90s and where we are now, the United States cannot destroy the Black Revolution. That's basically when you hear in this forum, when you hear the African People's Socialist Party, you see the chairman and other leaders of the party. This is evidence that our revolution is re-emerging, and which means now that this forum today, I'm sure, is being watched by people from around the world, including people in Haiti. And that's why we're taking the future in our own hands. Those death squad, they are the forces of the past. The Tonton Macoute, as you already know, forces of the past. The future is in the revolution. And I like these slogans, coming from Haiti during Dessalines, coupe tête, Bulekai, and we say basically it's revolution that's going to make that happen. Revolution is the solution, but it requires organization. With organization, all these death squad, they cannot stand up to the strength, to the force of organized working class. They can bring chaos, they can intimidate the workers, but when the workers are organized and they have the benefit of the party leadership and philosophy and vision, and they have access to the worldwide mobilization for Africans. Remember, soon to be 2 billion strong, all these death squad, they will disappear because the working class will be armed to make the revolution, armed to protect our neighborhood, armed to take control of the economy and protect every single gain, and that's where we are. But we need to have the party to win the people to organization and to win the people, fight for revolution, fight for power in the hands of African working class, and that will make the difference. And the death squad, all these groups, it doesn't matter who else is part of this organization that the comrades mentioned. When the revolution is on the ground, if the party is over. And that's why we're calling everyone to stop any more of this death squad, all these so-called gangsters, join the party today, so the working class can have a new vision of the future in Haiti today.
Thank you, Secretary General Moise, and thank you, Arvi, for your question. We're going to
Comrade, there's in the news today about demonstrations on the streets of Cuba, and they're painting this as like a critical development in Cuba, and they're holding this up as a kind of example of a despotic government that can't feed the people and all of these different kinds of issues and problems. And I want to say that that's part of what I meant in terms of, like socialists can seize power, but it's not this difference. That's not the same thing as having socialism in a sea of capitalist depravity. And what we have is that Cuba has been isolated from this very inception, except for the short periods of time where the Soviet Union existed and Venezuela had relative strength and could provide some kind of relief. But the American government is starving Cuba and starving the people of Cuba. And it has been doing this now for I don't know how many years, just about since the existence of the Cuban Revolution. And it's necessary for them to do that so that they can try to set an example for oppressed people. Here in the United States, they've just published polls that shows that the majority of young white people believe in socialism, and 60% of the African population in the United States wants socialism. And Cuba has been like a sort of a heroic example for different people. And so now it's important for them to show Cuba to be oppressive, and as this is part of the whole thing they've done over and over again. So yeah, they got agents in Cuba. At the moment, Cuba opened up to the extent that they tried to open the economy to deal with the embargo. They've been able to get more agents in Cuba, but it's not absolutely necessary for them to have agents. They starve the people and push the people into severe states of desperation and then suggest to the people that a solution for this is to be able to get to the United States, where if you're dark enough, you can get gunned down by your local gendarme here. So I just think it's important. When we say that the whole shape of the world economy is determined by colonial capitalism, we mean the world economy. And we're talking about Cuba being a part of that. And some people will be looking at Russia and they'll be looking at China, and we say the world economy, the one that China and the United States is functioning in is a colonial capitalist economy. And the reason that China is not in the same state as some of the other places is because China did keep itself shut down after they took power, after they destroyed sectors of the petty bourgeoisie that were problematic. They took power and they shut it down. And that the imperialists did not have the same kind of access to China so that they could create the kind of mischief that they've created in some other places. But the economy that China functions in is a colonial capitalist economy. The Chinese government, it's not the Maoist government that saw itself. The Chinese Communist Party is not the Maoist Communist Party that saw itself as obligated to destroy capitalism. You don't see that, and obligated to unite with the revolutionary parties of other peoples around the world. So this is what it is that we're looking at when we see this stuff that's happening in Cuba. I'm saying that because I know that there's somebody who's participating in this meeting today who's seeing that about Cuba and hear us keep talking about socialism and communism and think that what they're doing to Cuba is an example of a consequence of Cuba being a socialist, trying to be socialist, when it's an example of how vicious capitalism is. That's what it is more than anything else. Uhuru. I know I've spoken too long, Comrade Akile. If I say anything more, I'll try to abbreviate it. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you so much, Chairman. I just think that that's a really important understanding that we really have to grasp around this question of socialism. So thank you, Chairman. And so we're going to take about 2 more questions. We have another one from Comrade Morlai. This one's directed to Alikia. It says, Uhuru, Comrade Alikia, how is our movement providing leadership for the working class in Haiti?
Uhuru, thank you, Comrade Morlai, for that question. One thing that the chairman in the party, always pushes is the question of political education. So that is including articles written for the Burning Spear newspaper, and in this most recent period, translations of articles and other party documents. Like, for example, in the May issue of the Burning Spear newspaper, you will see a full Haitian Creole version of the African People's Socialist Party 14-point platform, what we want, what we believe. And there will be, other future texts, especially critical texts of the movement that is going to be in Creole, and then launching or relaunching a video series called The War of Ideas. So, political education is key to recruiting Africans into the organization, Africans from Haiti, and we're trying to get it. We have it in English, we're trying to get it in Creole, and just to keep getting African internationalism out. So that's what I can say at this point. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you, Alikia. If there are no other contributions to that answer, then we'll go ahead and move it to the last question for this section. And I know we don't want to shut it down because it's such a great discussion, but this question came from Gilbert. It wasn't directed at anyone, but it's asking, are you also working with other reparations and economic freedom movements on the continent of Africa, for example? So maybe Chairman Tafari.
All right. Yeah, Uhuru, Comrade. Who asked the question again?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't read the name. This question came from a Gilbert G.
Oh yeah, Comrade. The question of reparation. Firstly, it was our party through the leadership of Chairman Omali Chila that made it a household name word, especially in the United States. And right now, the question of reparation is being discussed in many, like spaces and so forth. And here in occupied Tanzania, especially in occupied Tanzania, because it's a settler colony, you have a high concentration of Europeans here, like something like 4 million plus 4 million white people here in South Africa. And so the party here has, is actually organizing a webinar that's gonna be, we're gonna be seeing the promotion of that webinar soon. So the discussion around reparations here is gonna be a question that has to address the question of or respond to the question of the African Revolution. Our party believes that everything, the solution is revolution, overturning the whole colonial social system. And I have seen some people talk about reparations here in terms of, simply like there's this thing called the TRC, that we were not paid enough in the TRC, like things like that and so forth. And it's not a thing that addresses the question of whether we're going to get our resources back, going to get black power, we're going to get our land back and so forth. So there has not been any organization that how we know of addressing the question of reparations in Africa, that I know of at least, so it is the party that's going to introduce that in a serious way. So yeah, just look out for that event online. Yeah.
So may I just say a couple of things quickly on that? As the director said, is the African People's Socialist Party that is introducing the reparation question in a very serious way. For example, you might be aware that France controls the currency used in 14 African countries plus Comoros Island. That makes it 15, but I don't call it the France CFA over there. And most African people bourgeoisie really mobilized. When I say most, they say a sector of the African bourgeoisie is mobilized around the question of the currency. They don't want France to control the production of the currency, because the money is printed in France, but the banks also are controlled by France, and French ruling class sits in executive committees of all those banks, and they have the right of veto. So the African bourgeoisie is saying they want to be like Ghana, like Nigeria, like the rest of so-called Anglophone African countries, because the British don't sit in the banks. The British don't control the currency like the French do. That's what they say. So, and we're saying, among other things, France should not control the currency of African countries, but France must pay reparation for, they control this currency since the so-called independence. So for almost 6 years. So you can't just say you want the French to release control, but reparation demand. And we're not just talking about that part of the reparation. We're going to demand a reparation for colonialism, for colonial slavery as well. But my point is, we are basically introducing the demand of reparation so that not only not to allow the African bourgeoisie monopoly of the question of France CFA, so the African working class can also participate in that question and take it in a direction that will allow us to advance the revolutionary process. Another example, you do hear many activists and in Europe, for example, fighting for the return of artifacts, African arts from France, Britain, Holland, Portugal, Belgium, and so on. And then we, demanding reparation for Europeans, having stolen our arts and making money out of it and things like that. And I just heard of Belgium, they just announced they're going to return some arts stolen from Congo. And we are the one who are introducing the question of reparation in the Congo too, because we're saying Belgium must pay Belgium reparation. This is the demand that is circulating, and I've seen going places from Belgium to Congo and so on. This is also another contribution we're making. So in the process of building the party, of building the movement, also building solidarity in Europe, winning white people to take the right stand to be in solidarity. So we're deepening the question of reparation in Europe and in Africa, as Director Tapari said, and also for Africans themselves to understand that the question of reparation is a question to forward the revolutionary process. Everything's a function basically of the revolution. And that's another contribution we're making. It's still a process. It's not yet fully developed, but as we continue in this process, some 6 months or a year, I'm sure we'll definitely share more with the public, with Africans and everybody else. Well,
I'd like to just comment on I want to just remind Comrade Gilbert here that we are not fighting for democratic colonialism. And, so it's not to say that we won't make democratic demands and what have you, but that's not the end that we're struggling for. The reparations demand is really important to us. We think we can mobilize African people and put Africans on the offensive regarding what's been stolen from us. But from our perspective, the reparations issue is a function of the revolution. There are a lot of people who talk about reparations in Africa and Africa's in other places who see the acquisition of a payoff by the colonizer as what it is that we're looking for. They are kind of like those people who thought that just getting formal independence was going to change the conditions of African people. That never was enough. And from our perspective, the struggle for reparations is part of the struggle to negate the colonial-capitalist economy in our lives, the colonial-capitalist existence in our lives. So we mobilize the people wherever we are, and we fight, we demand, we arm the people. It's a relatively simple demand. It's not complicated, by any kind of highbrow theoretical difficulties. To get to, they stole it from us, we want it back. That's relative simple demand that all the Africans can unite with, and we want to mobilize Africans in that direction. Of course, the issue around reparation, like every other issue that's grasped the imagination of the mass of the people, will result in the colonial capitalists themselves and their petty bourgeois neo-colonial forces trying to take leadership of it and trying to define what is meant by these questions and whose interests it should serve. That's what makes the significance of the party so profound, Comrade Gilbert. That's where the people of the party, the workers, have to have their own revolutionary organization that speaks to the world and to the issue of the African nation from the perspective of the African working class. And part of what we've come to understand a long time ago is the struggle for that within the struggle for national liberation, there's also a class war that's raging even within that struggle. So I wanted to, just share that observation. And also I wanted to say, I see Comrade Lisa Davis has shared some information with us in terms of Cuba and about how the US set up a bogus Twitter account in Cuba. You can see it in the chat. And it was printed in the Guardian newspaper. About how the US did this and tried to stir up the sentiment among the Cuban people in Cuba against the government. Well, I'm sure they did that. I'm sure they did more than that. I'm sure they did all kinds of things and do all kinds of things all the time. And there's no doubt in my mind about that. But I think what's really important for us, our obligation is not just to have some kind of passive solidarity with Cuba or Venezuela or what have you. Our obligation is to build a revolutionary movement. Almost any African who've gone through, especially the period of the 1960s, where we saw a high tide of revolutionary struggle around the world. anytime you came into contact with a revolutionary from some other place and you say, well, what can we do? They would say, make revolution where you are. And our responsibility is follow the idea of Che Guevara, 2, 3 many Vietnams. The fact is that the US and the imperialists have to find themselves having to fight for their very lives. If they have to fight for their lives in New Jersey, it makes it harder for them to do the kinds of things that they do in Haiti or in Cuba and these other places. That's what our responsibility is. And I'm saying this because there are a lot of forces who speak very well, they talk very well, they have good webinars and things like that, but they are talking about an issue and they are not involving themselves in the issue. Our objective is to have power. That's what this discussion is about. It's to contribute to our capacity for the working class to come to power. And so I just want to say those things. Comrade Director Akile, I appreciate it. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman. Well, I just want to appreciate you and appreciate all of our viewers as well as all of our panelists. And unfortunately, we are coming to a close for this webinar, but I just appreciate this discussion and all of you helping to define the situation and bring our people, closer to, the solution, African Revolution, and being able to just lay this out clearly. We have Africans all over the world tuning into this discussion right now and saying how informative this has been, that this was an incredible educational opportunity, and people are being moved to join this struggle. So thank you all so much for your contributions to this program. Again, explaining the situation that we see in the world. This clarity that African internationalism provides is untouched, unmatched anywhere in the world. So thank you so much. And before we close it out officially, and Chairman will be giving us our closing statements, I want to go ahead and just give some announcements for people. Oh, and I also, just because this is the Global Black Revolution webinar, we've been talking about the African Revolution as the world revolution, just wanted to recognize Comrade Benjamin Prado, the Secretary General of Unión del Barrio, to which we have a close relationship with, and he's tuning in and said, Uhuru, that's right, the settler colonial system is the parasite of all humanity. It must be crushed and eliminated. So Uhuru, Comrade Benjamin, Uhuru to Unión del Barrio. And yeah, just want to appreciate you for tuning in. So by way of our announcements, we have, several things happening throughout the Uhuru movement on a daily basis. So if you want to just stay tuned while we go through these announcements. So, and I also want to encourage people to subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube, our YouTube channel that you're tuning in from right now. Subscribe to this channel because we have incredible opportunities for you to tune in to events and political education sessions with the leaders of our movement, just like this. So subscribe to Burning Spear TV channel on YouTube. I want to encourage people to listen to Black Power 96.3 FM radio broadcasting out of St. Petersburg, Florida, and accessible via the Black Power 96 app for Apple and Android, or online at blackpower96.org. And let you know that next Sunday kicks off the station's July member fund drive, running from July 18th through the 31st, with special shows and special thank yous when you donate to become a supporting member of the station. And mark your calendar for a special online benefit concert, Freedom Mic Battle of the Genres. 12 artists in the genres of gospel, Southern soul, R&B, and hip hop, happening Friday, July 30th at 7 p.m. Eastern. And you can register at tinyurl.com/free Freedom Mic 2K21. And order your copy of Chairman Omali Yeshitela's latest books, Vanguard, The Advanced Attachment of the African Revolution, An Uneasy Equilibrium, and more works by the chairman and leaders of our movement. For some more political education, go to burningspearmarketplace.com, get the Burning Spear newspaper, get these incredible books published by Burning Spear Publications, again, at burningspearmarketplace.com. On August 7th and 8th, the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations will be hosting its 12th annual conference. It will be a virtual conference designed to take our struggle forward during the ever-deepening crisis enveloping the U.S. and the colonial capitalist world, as we just discussed today. The theme of the conference is deepening the resistance to police terror, honoring our political prisoners and prisoners of war, Black community control of the police. For more information on how to register, visit blackisbackcoalition.org. loazi-kinshasa.org. And like and follow the Loazi Kinshasa like page on Facebook for more African internationalist political education. Secretary General Loazi Kinshasa does frequent live events, such as the War of Ideas series. He includes live sessions done in French. And to get alerts of when SG Loazi is going live, make sure to like and follow his page today. And to keep up with our movement events, visit theburningspear.com's events page and subscribe to our mailing list. Also check out those articles that Comrade Alikia was referencing. They're all up on theburningspear.com. So again, I just want to thank you all for participating in this webinar. Subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube, like the Chairman Amalia Shatella Facebook page. And that's going to do it for me as your MC. I want to go ahead and turn it over to our leadership, Chairman Amalia Shatella, for our closing words.
Uhuru, thank you so much, Comrade Akile. And I want to just express my appreciation to all of these incredible presenters for this discussion on today, and especially those of you who are party organization, and I know the work that you're doing in various places around the world, and and all of you who've come onto this discussion. I just want to say that in closing, that right now, one of the most, the two important tasks that we are confronted with is organization. We have to put the organization down on the ground every place Africans are located, every place on earth where there are Black people. And we have to, even as we're in the process of doing that, deepen our consolidated relationship with colonized peoples around the world. I'm happy to see that Comrade Benjamin Prado from Unión de Barrio, Mexican National Liberation Movement, is with us here today. So organization is fundamental, but also critical to the issue of organization is ideology, is to be able, as a colonized people, has been central to the development of the whole capitalist system. The war that has been made against Africa, that continues to be made against Africa, is made against us directly in terms of how it strives to shape our own consciousness of the world and our consciousness of each other, but it also helps to shape the consciousness of the peoples of the world about Africa and African people. It is an extraordinary, this is one of the reasons they can write things about Haiti and how, you know, this Haiti can't take care of itself since the white man left. Or how even in our own communities in certain parts of Africa, we'll hear people wishing that the white man was back there living under neo-colonial domination because things are being so bad. The question of philosophy, of theory, is critical. And we have to be better armed to take this question on. One thing that people should get from this discussion is the African internationalist analyses that have flowed from this discussion, that permeated virtually everything that we've talked about, because we are in a war of ideas with our oppressors, and the deeper the crisis of our oppressor gets, the deeper that crisis, the more vicious the oppressor gets. And one of the arenas of this viciousness is in the arena of ideas, of philosophy, of convincing us and convincing the world of all kinds of horrible things about us. They write about, again, we look at what they say about Haiti, the same thing they say about South Africa in many ways. They take Zuma, they take the corruption, they take the ANC, and it's inferred, if not stated outright, that these are examples of African people being able to govern ourselves after the white man has gone. Of course, the white man never left, and that's been one of the problems. So this question of ideology and the question of theory is these are critical questions for us now. And you will see the African People's Socialist Party firmly fighting both for organization and for theory. Our objective is to win our freedom. And we invite everybody to join with us in this. And I again want to salute all of the comrades from the party and say, vanguard up, comrades, no compromise, no surrender, ease relate to Africa.
Uhuru. Uhuru, thank you so much, Chairman, again. And Izweletu, I Africa, one nation, vanguard up.
Well,
Uhuru.
Vinga.
Vanguard